Imagine being in your early 30s and suddenly finding yourself at the center of global attention, not as an athlete, not as a tech genius, but as the leader of a nation standing up against some of the world's most powerful forces. That's the story of Ibrahim Traore, the military officer from Burkina Faso who became the youngest head of state in the world. His rise wasn't just about politics, it was about defiance, courage, and a voice that shook centuries of power structures. Today, we'll explore how this young leader challenged global powers, what it means for Africa, and why the entire world is watching him so closely. But before we dive in, let me ask you this. What does it take for one man, barely in his 30s, to stand against nations that have ruled the global order for decades? That's the journey we're about to uncover. Number 1. Who was Ibrahim Traore? Ibrahim Traore was born in 1988 in Burkina Faso, a landlocked country in West Africa. If you've never heard much about Burkina Faso, you're not alone. For decades, this small country has lived under the shadow of poverty, colonial influence, and instability. But it's also a land of rich culture, resilience, and people who've had to navigate life with immense courage. Traore grew up during times when Burkina Faso struggled with coups, foreign influence, and the ever-present threat of extremist violence. He wasn't born into wealth or power. Instead, like many young Africans, he came of age in a world where opportunities were scarce and politics felt like a game rigged in someone else's favor. Number 2. Traore faced the moment of change, the coup of 2022. Fast forward to 2022. Burkina Faso was in chaos. Extremist groups linked to Al-Qaeda and ISIS were wreaking havoc. Entire villages were being displaced, the government was losing control, and ordinary people felt abandoned. The man in charge at that time, Lieutenant Colonel Paul-Henri Damiba, had promised stability after seizing power in a coup earlier that year. But within months, frustration grew. Violence wasn't slowing down, it was escalating. Enter Ibrahim Traore. At just 34 years old, he and his fellow soldiers believed enough was enough. In late September 2022, Traore led a coup that ousted Damiba. Suddenly, the world woke up to headlines. Burkina Faso's new leader is the youngest head of state in the world. But this wasn't just about another coup in Africa. Something was different. The people, especially the youth, didn't resist him. They embraced him. Crowds poured into the streets, waving flags, chanting his name, and celebrating as if a long-awaited change had finally arrived. Number 3. Why the people loved him. Why did ordinary Burkinabe citizens support this young soldier so quickly? The answer lies in something deeper than politics, it lies in trust. You see, Africa has seen countless coups, and most of them end up being disappointments. But Traore's rise was marked by his simple, straightforward message, I am here to serve the people, not foreign interests. This was powerful. Because for decades, many African nations have been stuck in a tug-of-war between local leaders and powerful global players, especially former colonial powers like France. In Burkina Faso, France had maintained a strong influence over politics, the military, and even the economy. But Ibrahim Traore? He wasn't afraid to call it out. He openly questioned why a sovereign African nation should still be dependent on foreign powers for its survival. He spoke about reclaiming dignity, sovereignty, and control over Burkina Faso's future. Number 4. The bigger picture, a young man versus global powers. Now, here's where things get really interesting. Imagine being 34, sitting across the table from world leaders, diplomats, and corporations who have had decades of experience, money, and power on their side. Most would crumble. But not Traore. In his speeches, he didn't hesitate to point out the hypocrisy of the global system. He argued that Africa's wealth, its gold, uranium, and other resources had fueled the prosperity of the West, while African people remained poor. When Ibrahim Traore took power in 2022, the world was still trying to figure out who he really was. Number 5. Traore faced the France factor, breaking old chains. For decades, France has been the most powerful external player in Burkina Faso and across much of West Africa. This relationship is known as Franc-Afrique. On paper, it looked like partnership. In reality, Critics argue it was a system that kept former French colonies dependent, politically, militarily, and economically. French troops had been stationed in Burkina Faso for years under the justification of fighting terrorism. Yet despite this, terrorist attacks were increasing, not decreasing. Ordinary Burkinabe began asking a painful question: if France is here to protect us, why are we still dying? Traoré didn't tiptoe around the issue. In his speeches, he spoke directly. He questioned why French troops were present if the security situation kept getting worse. He challenged the idea that Burkina Faso's sovereignty should be tied to French approval, and, most dramatically, he ordered French forces to leave. Think about that for a moment. A 34-year-old leader telling a former colonial superpower, "Pack your bags, we don't need you here anymore." This was shocking. Many leaders before him had criticized France quietly, but very few had the courage to cut the cord so openly. Traoré wasn't afraid to burn bridges if it meant Burkina Faso could reclaim dignity. Number 6. Turning east, new alliances. Now, when you push away one global power, you often need another source of support. Traoré knew this, and so, he began looking east. He sought closer ties with Russia, a move that drew massive global attention. Russian flags began appearing in pro-Traoré demonstrations in Burkina Faso's capital. Why? Because for many Africans, Russia symbolized an alternative, someone outside the Western sphere who could provide military support without the same colonial baggage. In addition, Traoré strengthened ties with other African nations, particularly Mali and Niger, two neighbors who were also experiencing their own political upheavals and frustrations with France. Together, these three countries began forming what some call a new bloc of defiance in West Africa. It wasn't just politics, it was symbolism. It was a statement that said, Africa can stand together without being puppets of outside powers. Number 7. The message to the youth. But here's what really makes Traoré stand out. He doesn't just talk to politicians, generals, or foreign leaders. His real audience is the youth of Africa. In one of his speeches, he said something powerful: the real battle of our generation is to free our minds, to free our land, and to reclaim our dignity. That message hit home because Africa is the youngest continent in the world. The majority of people are under 25. These are young men and women who are tired of broken promises, tired of corruption, tired of seeing their countries rich in resources but poor in reality. Traoré speaks their language. He represents them. And that's why crowds fill the streets chanting his name. To them, he isn't just a soldier, he's a symbol that change is possible, even in the face of powerful global interests. Number 8. Global reactions, mixed feelings. Of course, not everyone is cheering. In Western capitals, Traoré's moves raised alarms. France accused him of pushing Burkina Faso into the arms of Russia. Analysts warned that cutting ties with traditional partners might isolate the country economically and diplomatically. But here's the twist. While some Western leaders criticized him, many ordinary Africans across the continent admired him. They saw in him what they had long hoped for: a leader unafraid to speak truth to power. And this isn't just about Burkina Faso anymore. Ibrahim Traoré has become part of a bigger conversation.